Welcome to the Physician Wealth Med podcast. It's wealth medicine for doctors. If you're a doctor and you have no time, it looks like you found us just in time. This podcast is for all doctors who would like to work on their personal wealth, but do not have traditional hours to do so because they have no time. We're here to jump into topics that will help you address your wealth both inside and outside of your practice so that you can live the life of significance you're dreaming of. You'll hear from your peers, you'll hear from industry professionals, and your host and wealth advisor, me, Kevin Sullivan. This is your time. Now let's get started with today's podcast. Welcome to this edition of the podcast, Physician Wealth Meds. We like to say it's wealth medicine for doctors because that's what we do all day long. We have a very special guest with us today, Dr. Lori Bentz, chiropractor. She's part of a personal injury physicians group with Dr. Tony that we work with very closely. And I've got Dr. Tony's book here. It's Think and Be Successful. So it's a group of about 4,000 personal injury doctors that all collaborate in a large Facebook group, and we've been so pleased to be the one of the annual sponsors of the group. I'm a member of that, and so is Dr. Bentz. And I just want to thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Yes, I know it's getting close to Christmas, so this is being recorded around Christmas time, a few days before Christmas. So Merry Christmas to you, and I hope you're going to have a great holiday season. So thank you in this busy time of year to take your time out to talk to me. One of the things this podcast is going to focus on is business valuations and selling a practice. And I wanted to really jump in and interview doctors that have done this before or may do it again. And this is where Dr. Bentz came in, because not only did she do it before, but she's going to do it again at some point. So you're going to get both sides of that. And I just think you're going to be so thrilled to hear what we have to say. So this podcast will focus on the importance of having a business valuation for medical practices and how the business valuation will not only let the doctor know what the value or worth is, but to utilize that as a tool for growth, making the practice better and more sellable when it comes time to transition. 98% of business owners, not even in the medical profession, just talking globally, business owners know what the business value is. And I heard someone say you wouldn't wait till 6 months before you retire to find out what the value of your 401k would be, right? I mean, you'd think that was crazy, or the year before. So the importance of a business valuation lets you get things ready and line things up along the way to make sure that you're maximizing the value, you're getting strategic things in place so that when you do come to that transition part, you've got your plan. It's not a reactive thing. It's more of a proactive thing. And one of the reasons why I wanted to interview Dr. Lori is just because of her experience too in the past. She comes highly recommended from Dr. Tony. So welcome again. Tell us a little bit about how long you've been in practice and where you're located and all of the things that go with that.
All right. Well, I've been in practice almost 39 years. I'm over 39 years now. And I'm practicing right now in Marshfield, Wisconsin. And I've been here for 27 years. So I've been around a while.
Yes. Now, are you in private practice? Are you in a partnership? I thought I saw another doctor that works with you in your group.
I'm in private practice. I've had associates in the past. I do not have one currently. I'd like one.
I gotcha. So when they come and see you, they're coming to see you for all that you bring to the table. Me. Yes. So if I could ask you a few questions, like what does your day look like? What does your staffing look like? What's your current practice after 39 years looking like at this point?
All right. I have kind of fun practice hours. I work from 1 to 7, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 8 to 12, 2:30 till 6, and Fridays 8 to 1. So I'm working 5 days a week, but I still feel like I have a 3-day weekend. However, Nice. If I'm in town on Saturdays, I go into the office for about an hour and I get to see all my truckers and the PI patients, the acute injury ones that just need to be seen pretty much every day. And I have been known to come into the office on Sundays when people are super acute.
That's excellent. So you're available. Accessibility is a big key, yep. Especially if your name's on the line. That's for sure. So I'm sure after all of these years, people really know you. You know your patients. You know exactly what they need and the responsiveness. You build that relationship over time.
Absolutely. I think relationships are key, especially because I'm in a town of about 20,000. So it's probably the biggest small town I've ever lived in. And people tend to know you. They know your reputation, and that really counts for a lot in a smaller place.
Now, what would you think? Let's say you're a buyer on the other side and you're looking to acquire a practice. What would be some of the things that you would look for?
No, I think that's a great question because I'm trying to look at it from that direction because I'm at a point in time that I would like to be selling and then working for another doctor. I don't want to stop working. I like to do it a little bit less.
I
So
got
the
you.
things I would look for is I would look for, what is the income? What is the overhead? How do the patients, respond? Do patients schedule like weeks on end out? Is it more of a are they acute? Do they just come in when they need to? How is there an ebb and flow? Is there times of the year that it's busier or less busy? That way, when times are less busy, that's a good time to plan on vacations and time off, times to do seminars. So I would look for those kind of things.
Absolutely. Those are key performance things that you want to look at, and maybe how much recurring revenue is coming in from your day to day as well. I know we talk to doctors a lot, and I find that medical profession, especially, are so busy working in their practice, sometimes they don't work on it. It's hard to pull yourself away and to say, you know what, if I take an hour or two to divert it this way, that's going to create a lifetime worth of wealth for me outside of the office long after I'm doing this,
Mm-hmm.
as far as living that life of significance that they always want to get to. So one of the big concerns there is to check out, the patient flow, how many are coming in. Do you like doing seminars, by the way? Yeah, I knew you had mentioned that.
I really do like doing seminars. I think it's important not just for the continuing education that you're required to do, but like my
Hmm.
passion is really spinal trauma. So I'm certified in
Hmm.
spinal trauma from 2 chiropractic colleges. And I think it's really important to keep up with the latest and greatest. And also, there's something about being with your colleagues that are like minded that really gives you a lot of energy. And it also gives you some really great ideas on what you might be doing differently or what you can do to enhance how the patients respond and
Hmm.
how your practice grows, because the better the patients do, the better you're going to do.
Absolutely. So, what does your practice bring to the table that might be a little different than another practice, maybe in the next town over or a few blocks over? What makes you
well,
unique?
well, our tagline is "We're there when you need us," and I am really big on um, it's really great. I hear these people, they've got these wonderful practices, they're booked like 6, 8, 10 weeks out. But if you happen to fall down the stairs today, you need an appointment now. You don't need it in 6 weeks.
Right.
And so the fact that I try very hard to get you in the same day that you call me or within 24 hours, that's huge. And people know that. So I get a lot of referrals, even from other doctors that are like, oh, I don't want to be in on Thursdays and I don't want to be, and I only want to work 3 days a week. And that's great. But if you're doing acute care, that's not probably the best way to do it. You might want to focus on something else. And so I have doctors who they don't want to do acute care. They don't want to see PI patients. So they send them to me, and I'm really okay with that.
Oh, that's excellent. I own a financial services company, wealth management firm, and we have active clients in 15 different states. We have offices in 2 states. And I remember when I started doing the multiple state thing, that the first thing you have to be if you're going to do this type of work, having offices in 2 states, is accessible. So there was a survey done even in the 90s. I can remember back in the 90s, even in the investment world, it says, be there when I need you, give me quick response and service, and talk to me when times are bad. Those are like the top 3 out of the top 5 things. And it seems like you're working that into your practice because that's what makes success. It seems like you have that same passion for what you're doing in your world too.
Absolutely.
So talk to me about a practice. You had said when we first connected that you had sold a practice 20 plus years ago, 25 or
Yes.
6 years ago. And
Yes.
so tell me a little bit about that. Like what was going on back then and what made you sell it then and that type of
Okay.
thing.
So I was living in Newport News, Virginia, and my practice was about 70% personal injury at the time.
Hmm.
And I had a young son, and we decided that where we were in Virginia was not the best school system. And it's not a place we really wanted to send our kids to school. And I'm from Wisconsin originally. So we put the practice up for sale. And once it sold, then we actually moved to Wisconsin to buy another practice, which fell through. So I ended up opening up on my own, which worked out really well.
There you go.
But yeah, it's at the time back then, I didn't know there were people around to evaluate a practice. And the only way we knew how to do that was from a practice management group. They said, take an average of your last 12 months of collections, multiply it times 8. That's what your practice is worth. I know
Gotcha.
I know now there's a lot other ways to evaluate a practice. I mean, I know 4 of them at this point in time because I wanted to do that. So I know where my practice is at. So when I go to sell this one, where the right valuation would be.
Gotcha. And I know Newport News, that's a huge Navy, area there. You probably have paratroopers coming down right on. But
Well, we had within the 30 miles of us, there were every single branch of the military. And I was actually married to a Navy man. So I
there you
know all
go.
about that.
Well, I can definitely detect the Wisconsin accent. So I'm in the Buffalo, New York area too, and of course, I don't know what you hear from me. I'm probably a mixed bag of everything.
Your accent isn't way too strong. It's almost like we call newscaster.
Oh, there you go.
It's less acute accent than I normally find from someone in New York.
I gotcha. Well, let me just ask you this. Thinking back on that sale that you did in Newport News, what do you think went right and what do you think went wrong? Like, what could you have done differently, or was there any woulda, coulda, shouldas in there?
There's only one woulda, coulda, shoulda. I owner financed it. They paid me off in 3 years. That was never an issue. It was the practice obviously supported the price that I sold it at. The only thing I probably would have done differently is that I was told to not sell my accounts receivable, but to pay the new owners 15% to collect that. So I did do one thing right. I gave them 1 year to collect the accounts receivable at 15%. And then after the year, I turned over what was left to the person who'd been my billing person, and I gave her 10%. So at the time, I would just say, here's 10% for a year, see what you can do to collect them. And between the two of them, they collected all of my accounts receivable, but about $1,000, which was I think it was about 180,000 I had as accounts receivable back then.
Isn't that fantastic? There's so many ways to craft these deals, and this is why it's so important. And one of the reasons why I wanted to interview you is doctors interviewing for the other doctors so that they can see something that just happened. And I'm not too sure people would think about doing that. That's a phenomenal way to do it. They have skin in the game, to do that. And of course, you get to relinquish that a little bit and step back, and still everybody pretty much got paid. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was really good. It did take the last payoff was 5 years after I sold the practice, because it was a couple who had been rear-ended, and he passed away before it was settled. So it took that much longer for it to settle, and then it had to go to the estate and then come out of the estate to me. But eventually I got all but about $1,000. So I was very pleased with how that went.
That brings up a good question. I'm so happy for you on that. Being a personal injury doctor, and you have these lag times, between the time you get paid for doing your treatment and stuff. Was it 5 years you had said on that? But is that like norm on the other side? Like when you sell a practice, that could still trickle in for years on out?
Yeah, it can trickle in for years. And I would say that probably all but that one was probably done within the first 24 to 28 months. I would say that the huge majority of it was collected. But when you're doing a lot of PI, when you first start, that accounts receivable just looks atrocious compared to what you're coming in. But then as you do it, it kind of rolls over. So, you're still doing it. So stuff you did a couple of years ago is coming in now, and then the stuff you're doing now will be coming in a couple of years. But med pay is a lot more common now than it was back then. So you're getting paid at least some right up front with the med pay, or I think they call it PIP. It's got different names in different locations. And that makes a big difference. So that keeps your cash flow going a little bit while you're waiting on the settlement for the rest of it.
Right. And that gives something constantly in the pipeline anyways, so what's coming.
It definitely helps.
Yes. So do you know of other doctors that might have, a lot of times that there's either lump sum, a lot of people do structured payments like you did over a period of time. What about a sell and stay strategy? Do you know any other doctors that have done that?
Yeah, I do know some doctors that have done that. And that's what I'm looking to do this next time, is that I want to sell my practice and then work for the new doc, which I think will be very helpful, because that way there'll be someone that'll be able to be there. Like if you go
Hmm.
off to a seminar, there's still someone there taking care of your patients while you're gone. It's
Yeah.
really hard as a solo practitioner to be gone for more than a week. And I do suggest, like, if you're gonna be gone for a week, don't do like a Sunday through a Sunday kind of thing. Leave on a Wednesday, come back on the following Wednesday. So you're still there on each part of the week. So it doesn't feel like you're gone forever. And that way you still can see patients on a weekly basis, even though you're still took that week off in the middle.
Oh, very good point. I know in doing another one of these podcasts on business valuations, I know that you would get a more profitable multiple as you start to work in other doctors to your practice and try to let go a little bit of yourself. Because I know people say, well, if you're it and something happens to you, then what? That's another thing you have to balance is your health as well, and time off to really get time off so you can kind of shut down. I know in our business, we can never really shut down mentally. There's always something going on up here.
Yeah, I figured out, like, my first year or so in practice, I was an associate for another doctor, and he would take two
Hmm.
straight weeks off every year. And then he'd
Hmm.
complain about being tired for all the rest of the year. And I would take like 4 or 5 4-day weekends. So I'd go like
Yeah.
Thursday through Sunday, and I do that every 2 or 3 months. And that was enough to kind of rejuvenate me. And I didn't have to wait for a whole nother year before I could take time off. And as a sole practitioner, it was much easier to do those little 4 and 5 day weekends.
Right.
So you were still in the practice, on a week to week basis. In fact, I just did one 2 weeks ago. My sons and I went to Boston for 4 days. It was a nice little relaxing little jaunt, came back and, went right back into practice. And it was just a nice
Hmm.
little kind of
Yeah.
breath.
Change of scenery. Yeah. We talked
Mhm.
about that. Boston's my favorite city. I think I
Well, it
told you
was,
that
it was
before.
awesome. We had a great
Oh, it is.
time.
So much to do there. So, yeah. Well, that's fantastic. Well, what do you think you'll do this time? So this time when you go to sell, how do you think you'll structure it? How do you think that will look like for doctors who might be wondering, what do you do in the future?
Well, one of the things that I did, and because I had an associate a while ago, and the plan was for the associate to buy me out, and then plans changed, didn't happen. But what I
Mhm.
did was I took my information to the bank and I said, "This is what my practice is worth right now. This is because I have a land company that owns my building. I own my own building,
Mhm.
and this is what I'm paying for rent. And my rent is quite high, but the amount of rent I'm paying would be enough for them to pay me for my office, for the building, for management fees, taxes, insurance, and everything, and a little bit extra." So the bank looked at my numbers like, "Well, you've been doing this for five years. We would okay a loan just on your numbers alone for anybody coming in." I said, "What happens if they owe $250,000 for student loan debt?" "Not a problem, because you've got all the numbers here that proves they can do this, no problem at all." So I think that finding out what your practice will support in regards to paying you is really a
Mhm.
good thing. That way, you know that the young doc, or maybe even older doc coming in, can, has the income to sustain and support what's going on, and still
That's exactly
pay
right.
themselves enough to pay off their student loan and have a life.
That's perfect because they can open the book and see the numbers and know that it's supportable and transferable at the same
Mhm.
time. We had a checklist. I got it here on my phone of the top 10 things that you could use a business valuation for. I'll just hit them
Mhm.
real quick. One of them was annual or quarterly financial planning, the
Mhm.
business sale. Number two, insurance coverage to know what your value is for insurance coverages. Number four, attracting investors.
Mhm.
Five, raising capital. Six, for business growth and expansion. Seven, legal or tax planning. And then eight, retirement planning. Nine, to set and attain long term goals for you and your family. And 10, to gain confidence in knowing the value of your greatest asset. It's your life's work.
Mhm.
When you have those financials right there, that makes it smooth all the way around. So you're looking for another doctor to join sell the practice
Yeah.
to, and then you'll be part of that for like what, 5 years, 10 years, or what are you thinking?
Well, since my chiropractor practiced for 60 years, I still have 21 left to go. I will
That's
say this,
perfect.
that because he had other doctors in the practice, his last 4 or 5 years, he worked like 8 to 1 Tuesday and Thursday mornings. And so he took care of all of his older patients, but also when the other doctors in the practice wanted to go on vacation, go on seminars, he was there to fill in. And so that is such a gift to have that. And when I had an associate's, I mean, I took a couple week-long vacations because I could. I had I felt comfortable in leaving my patients in the hands of a doctor who was so qualified. And that's just, I didn't have to think about my practice while I was gone. I just could go and enjoy myself. And I think having someone there to be able to do that, I think that's the hardest thing for being in solo practice is you don't have the ability to just, I'm going to be gone for a week, bye. We'll see you when I get back.
Exactly. When you're working alongside a doctor who's established like you are, is there any butting heads or is there anything like that, maybe ways you practice that comes into conflict, or how do you resolve those?
I've had a couple of associates in the past, and believe it or not, how we took care of practice was the easy part. I had a gentleman who'd been in practice for a while, and he had retired, decided he didn't like it, wanted to come back to work, so he came to work with me. And the only thing we argued about was the dress code. I told him he couldn't wear jeans to work.
There you go. Yeah.
And he's just like, but I said, yeah, I know, but this is my practice you're working in. I said, so if it's yours, I said, you can wear what you want, but this is mine. And, jeans just for our area is not a professional look for a doctor. So you don't get to wear jeans. So, when you go back and if you go back, practice wear jeans. So he gave me a little bit of hard time about that, but really was the only thing we argued about, mainly because some of these younger doctors that I've had, like interns come in before they graduate. Yeah. And I think the one thing that we don't do a great job in our colleges is practice management. How do you manage patients? How do you know how often to tell them to come in? I think that's one of the things that at least I was lacking in. And some of these younger ones coming up, it's hard to teach. You do learn it, but I think we need to do a better job of helping these students know how to schedule patients, like how many times a week they need to be seen for this condition versus that one.
Absolutely. And that's all part of mentoring and training, that they can glean from your experience, which is huge. And speaking of that promotes wellness, right? So that people can know that they're well. That's another thing about business valuations too. When you have a business valuation, not only does it set the bar, it establishes the value so you know what the current value is. It also will also anchor yourself against your peer group and say, okay, doctors who have practices that are similar size to mine, here's what their values are across the country and then also in your region. But the other thing too is how often do you do a business valuation? My point of view would be updated annually, just like you would think like an annual financial checkup. So you can see, here's what we did over this course of the year. What should we stop doing? That's always the other side of the question. It's like, what are we going to do? But sometimes the better question is, what should we stop doing? Because it's either killing us or taking up too much time, or it's not as productive as we thought. And I always tell people that when you know what yes is, you can say yes to all the right things and no to all the things that don't matter.
I think one of the hardest things, especially for doctors who are at the farther end, they're looking into retirement, is that they have worked so hard for so long to build this beautiful thing, and they want to ease back a little bit. But that's not good for your practice valuation, because if you're working less, if you're not seeing as many patients, then your income is less. So your practice is not valued as much. So that it's hard to find the balance of, you want to work less, but you don't want to work so much less that the value of your practice goes down. So you have to find a balance there. I mean, I know personally that my practice is not worth as much as it was 5 years ago. Well, maybe 3 years ago. But I also am taking more time off and more time for myself. So it hasn't decreased like a huge amount, but it definitely has made a difference on what my practice is worth. So do I want to work harder now to make my practice worth more? Or do I just want to sustain it and maybe bring it up just a little bit? I think that's really a hard thing for the doctors that are getting to close to retirement. Yeah. You want to ease off, but yet you don't want to drop the value of your practice. So where's the balance? Where's your happy spot?
Right. It's totally true, because you have to be mentally fit and ready to go too. When you need those breaks in life to rejuvenate yourself. I know that feeling. So that's a great point to consider. So these are some reasons why you should have that looked at every now and then to see what the momentum looks like. Usually what we ask for when we do those is like 3 years worth of tax returns. So you kind of see over the last 3 years, what's the momentum average, maybe even over the last 3 years, and what do things look like year over year. Sometimes a 1 year tax return tells a story, but a 3 year one tells an even better story. And it's all for their benefit. But as far as we wrapping this up a little bit, what advice would you give to doctors that are listening today on this podcast that might be considering 2, 3, 4 years out in the future as they work in their practice? What advice would you give them about this topic?
I think the biggest advice is once you get your practice evaluated, and make sure you do it the right way. Don't guess. I mean, what I used was the best I had at the time, but get someone who really knows what they're doing to give you a value of your practice. And then look at that and see whether or not someone buying your practice, will your practice support paying that price? If it doesn't, then you better change your overhead. And if it does, awesome. But looking at that, and also the other thing is some of these doctors that I talk to, they're like, well, my overhead's really high. Well, guess what? Your seminars, your perks, your salary, that's not part of overhead. That's part of the other side of that. Oh, all the donations you make, because you earn this money and now you're sharing it, you're being charitable. Those are not part of your overhead. So once you take that out, then your practice looks much better. But I think a lot of doctors forget that that's not a part of typical overhead for practice. If those things, you don't have to pay those things. Those are not necessary to keep your doors open.
Good point. And that's all part of knowing where you stand. With all the tools and technologies that we have to our disposal today, no one should ever have to wonder. That's what I tell people. It's like, no one should have to wonder where you stand. And wouldn't you like to know? And how soon would you like to know? Because the sooner that you know, the better you can make decisions moving forward. Any closing remarks do you think you would like to say here today, Dr. Bentz?
If anybody's interested in a beautiful practice in Midwest Wisconsin,
please
get a hold of me.
Yes.
If you know someone coming up that would be interested in. But I think the biggest thing is that whatever you're doing in practice, if you're not enjoying it, if you're not providing a good service to your patients, stop, sell your practice, go do something else, because your patients deserve the best from you at all times.
Very well said. I want to thank Dr. Lori Bentz for joining me today on this podcast. We try to keep the podcast around a 30-minute cycle, but if you have any contact information that you'd like to give, we'll put on the podcast so that people could reach out to you too as well. And let us know if you want a business valuation. The doctors that are looking at it, we have all the software. That's what we do. It's the way that we help support the PI docs, and especially in this particular group. But it's something that is very well done, a good piece of information for you to have for your practice. So I want to thank you today for joining us.
My pleasure.
This has been Physician Wealth Meds, and we'll talk to you again on our next time. Thank you so much. Bye. Dr. Lori Bentz is not affiliated with or endorsed by LPL Financial or Physician Wealth Meds. Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member of FINRA and SIPC. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. That's our podcast for today. And remember, if you're not working on your personal wealth, who is? Please share this podcast with your friends and colleagues, and make sure you subscribe, like, and share. Any questions about what you heard today, please send an email to kdsullivan@lpl.com. Physician Wealth Meds, wealth medicine for doctors.